to see you, and we are very grateful that you have agreed to give a webinar to our community. I mean, it's not for Azerbaijan. I'm sure that it will be for the world, because the webinar will be in English, and it's the topic of the webinar is corporate social responsibility and sustainability. Now, the sustainability is very important in modern life. So it's it's like we should obey it in daily life on sustainability. I want to give the floor to the Professor Rupert. I want you, Professor, introduce yourself. Tell a little bit about yourself and about your experience. I didn't want to tell because I want you introduce yourself as you wish. Thank you very much, Professor. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sosial. Thanks a lot. Yeah, well, good afternoon to you, and thanks for inviting me to give you a short introduction into corporate social responsibility and sustainability. 2 words regarding myself. I'm a professor, a full professor at the Korporativ International University in Georgia, and I'm also related to some universities here in Germany, the Technical University in Munich. And besides that, I still have let's say, a job as a manager in one of the companies here in Germany. So this is a pretty good idea regarding the transfer of my, let's say, practical experience into academics and education. I'm doing that for quite a while. I'm living here in Germany, in Munich or Munich area. And yeah, this is basically the idea behind that. What I will present to you is an introduction to corporate social responsibility. I did the seminar on business ethics last semester in Kutaisi, and what you're going to see is quite some, let's say, distillates, a comprehensive overview of my lecture of the last semester. My suggestion will be I go through it and you take notes, maybe only small notes, because you can ask questions afterwards. I will distribute the presentation, or Sosial already has the presentation, and whoever is interested, you can have it. So it's no secret behind that. If it's okay for you, I'm going to start with the overview.
Please, Professor, please. And now I'm sharing I've already shared my screen, but now I'm going to do full version. Full screen, please.
Excellent.
If anything, please just tell me next. I will change.
Yeah, exactly. I'll give an indication of that. Okay, that's the overview. It's about the 4 basic segments. Let's go to the next, please. Exactly. It's corporate social responsibility, it's corporate citizenship, corporate accountability, and the sustainability. We try to give a short definition on each of the expressions of the terminology here. Maybe there's some, let's say, distinction between them. Sometimes it's overlapping, and I try to enlighten you a little bit on that. Next, please. Yeah, key features of a corporation. We are currently discussing corporations, so this is very much related to business environment. And I mean, you may be aware of that. There's a legal status on the ownership of assets behind that. A corporation does own something, that's the assets. And corporations are regarded as some sort of an artificial person, okay, in the eyes of the law. Regarding the law, it's an artificial person. That means it does have some attributes of a person. Corporations are owned by shareholders. They normally are. Sometimes they are owned by families, but we are more or less focusing on the big corporations. But they exist independently of them. And managers and directors have a responsibility to protect the investment of the shareholders. They are acting on behalf of the shareholders. Okay, next, please. First question to you, something to, let's say, think about. Can corporations have social responsibilities? Now there's Milton Friedman, the classic here. And he says, it's from the 70s, social responsibility of a business is to make profit, to make money. He did, let's say, ameliorate that a little bit in the course of time, and said, yes, there is a little bit more than only making profit here. But anyway, he was vigorously arguing against the social responsibility, because he says only human beings have a moral responsibility for their actions. Company can't do that. And it's a manager's responsibility to act solely in the interest of shareholders. So social issues and problems are the proper provenance of state, governments, the political body, and not corporations. Okay, thank you. Let's go on. Yeah, can a corporation be morally responsible for its actions? And it's a debate starting in the late 70s, still continuing, I think, a complex debate here, but generally, the, let's say, community of scientists, of researchers agree that there is some, let's say, degree of responsibility accredited to corporations. The arguments are based on every organization has a corporate internal decision structure which directs decisions in line with predetermined goals. And also all organizations manifest a set of beliefs and values that lay out what is generally regarded as right and wrong. And this right and wrong is something that we're gonna see throughout this presentation. It's a little bit about doing the right thing. Okay, organizational culture, it does matter a lot here. And this is Mr. French from 79 and Mr. Moore from 99. Please go on. Now we come to corporate social responsibility in the narrow sense. So what do corporations, or why do corporations have social responsibilities? Now there's business reasons and there's moral reasons, okay? Business reasons, we regard this as enlightened self-interest. So the corporation has a self-interest in being, let's say, social responsibility as a value for itself. It does make sense to be social responsibility because satisfied customers demand that, especially in this time. Time has changed, right? When you remember the 80s, 90s, that is more greed is good. May you remember these famous saying, Mr. Gordon Gekko in one of the movies. But anyway, this has changed a lot. So we are much more concerned about our environment, about climate change, about doing the right thing. So the customer does expect a corporation to do the right thing and be socially responsible. Employees may be more attracted, committed. Now we have a situation of, let's say, scarce supply of talent. Where's the talent? Competition. Yeah, corporations compete for young, good, bright people, for talent. Not only young, but for bright people, for right people. It's not only the young ones. It's everybody who is in the industry. And a lot of employees, future employees, are attracted by companies, corporations who are or which are social responsibility. Then you have enforceable legislation. A lot of laws are now, let's say, coming out of the governmental, political, parliamentary discussion and are now effective, and they are, let's say, dealing with environmental or, let's say, sustainable issues. In order to avoid a law, a corporation can do a good thing in starting exactly, let's say, acting according laws regarding sustainability and avoid any, let's say, a disadvantage, a legal disadvantage. And also long-term investment, which benefits the corporation. That's what I mentioned before. It's a good idea to be social responsibility nowadays. Moral reasons, corporates cause social problems. True. Whenever you do something like manufacturing, textile industry, or you do some steel, or let's say your mining industry, you do not have a chance other than causing some pollution or waste. Next thing is corporations should use their power responsibly. A lot of corporations have immense power. Think about the Googles and the Facebooks or the Amazons. They have a lot of power, a lot of money, and then can do a lot of good things, but also can do a lot of bad things if, let's say, they do not have something like a social responsible culture. All corporate activities have some social impacts. You may agree on that. Whatever you do, it does affect the community, does affect society. So it's not, let's say, withdrawn from our daily life. Corporations rely on the contribution of a wide set of stakeholders in society, not just shareholders. This is the extended stakeholder approach. It's not only shareholders who own that, but it's also the customers, the suppliers, it's the activist groups, it's politics, families, employees. It's quite a number of stakeholders here. Next, please. So this is something like a short definition. What is corporate social responsibility? If you have to give, let's say, a definition: attempt by companies to meet the economic, legal, ethical, and philanthropic demands of a given society at a particular point in time. This is important because the awareness in a society or in our societies has changed over time. When you remember 70s, 80s, the approach to, let's say, climate issues like the global warming or pollution, like, for example, plastic, has now changed completely. So it's important. Particular point in time is something that needs to be mentioned, okay? And you see the nice picture here. I gave always the sources down there, so you have always the sources. It's about resources, goals. It's long-term normally, sincerity. It's about market because we are doing business. We are still a corporation. It's about responsibility, and it's about ethical behavior. Okay. Next, please. Yeah, this is Carroll's four-part model of corporate social responsibility. You may know that from Maslow's pyramid. So the foundation is economic responsibility. This is required by society. If you run a corporation, you have to make profit, or you have to try to make profits, right? Economic responsibility, because you need income, you need profit, pay your employees, pay your suppliers, earn money, pay taxes. So it's required by society. Also, the legal responsibilities, it's required by society because you have to obey the law. That's the reason why we have business laws. Now, the ethical responsibilities is something, it's not necessarily covered by law. It's a little bit gray area. You should do that. You are not necessarily obliged by law to do that. And this is expected by society. Society expects us to behave ethical, responsible. Corporations, us as managers. And then we have the last module, the last step, so to say. It's a philanthropic responsibility that's desired by society. It would be nice to have that. Philanthropic, doing good things for the environment, for people. This is nothing that is, let's say, laid out in a law. It's something you do voluntarily because you are one, or you want to do good things. Next, please. So CSR in international context, it's a little bit a different approach, or not only different approach, let's say there's a little bit of a different perception of a CSR in different parts of the planet. Regarding economic responsibility, focus in the United States or in the let's say Anglo-Saxon area, it's on shareholders, right? They are much more, let's say, pursuing still the idea of, okay, let's earn money, because that's the reason why we are here. Whereas, for example, in France has an extensive responsibility for employees, or India, very good example, has a tradition of investment in the local community. So in India, corporations like Tata are much, much more, let's say, engaged in community work. They have to, because this is something that is expected from them. When we have legal responsibility, the government of a state is in Europe the key enforcer of rules. A very, very strong bias, a very, very strong history regarding legal or legislative actions in the state. Elsewhere, governments seem to be more with more skepticism. For example, Latin America, but also the United States, right? State interference is something that is considered to be, let's say, kept to the minimum. Then we have ethical responsibility. A wide range of local ethical values, preferences, expectations vary. It depends really where you are. Asian countries may be a different ethical responsibility than, for example, here in Europe. Then we have philanthropic responsibility, something very, very important in the United States, but also England. Whereas in Europe, Central Europe, it is more, let's say, considered as covered by taxes paid to the government anyway. So in countries like United States, there is also India, the corporations and companies are much more expected to share their profits. Okay, next, please. So corporate social responsiveness, there's the strategies of the corporate social responsibility is divided into different aspects. It's a traditional view and it's a contemporary view. Traditional is a focus on risk, reactive. You try to avoid getting into trouble. So you focus on the risk of getting into trouble. So you are more, let's say, reactive regarding your social responsiveness. So there is no clear link to value creation business model. The CSR is a distribution of created value as something where it's just there. Okay, so that's CSR is bolted on. The contemporary view on corporate social responsiveness or responsibility here is it's a focus on reward. You do it proactively, right? Quite a number of corporations are really doing it on their own. They're just pushing the frontier, they're pushing the boundaries here. They try to establish their own initiatives, their own ideas of whatever it is, waste management, recycling, upcycling, circular industry, right? I will come to it later. So it's nothing that they are forced, but they do it on their own because I believe it's good to do that. They are increasing their perception, their public perception as a company. Positive public perception, also social media. So, and there's a clear link to value creation and business model, right? There's quite a number of companies who are explicitly promoting their activities and they are giving a lot of material, a lot of information what they are doing. They consider it as a value creation. And we say the CSR is built in. It's integrated, it's embedded. Okay, next, please. So outcomes of the corporate social performance, that's the result performance, okay? It's a key performance indicators, for example, what is the outcome here? So we have social policies, state the company's values, beliefs, goals with regard to its social environment. When you go to the internet and you browse a company, almost choose whatever you like. Normally you see on the website, there is some statement regarding social policies, what they believe in, what are their values, do's and don'ts, what they try to achieve. When they have social programs, that's the activities. So if you are telling somebody, oh, I believe in this and that, and I have this and that goal, you have to break it down in a program. What exactly I try to achieve, what I'm exactly trying to get done here. Measures, instruments implemented to achieve social policies. And social impacts, that's something that be traced by looking at concrete changes that have been achieved through programs. Okay, for example, if you are in textile industry, textile needs a lot of water. They have a lot of water pollution normally. One of the social programs you have is water, clear water, right? Water purification, whatever. It can be measured, easily measured. I start a program on clear water. I measure before and I measure continuously during my program. And then I get better results. Water quality is increasing. That's good. Social impact, people using the water have better water. Next, please. Corporate citizenship. It's the next thing I try to explain to you. Well, defining corporate citizenship, 3 perspectives. It's the limited view on CC. It's essential, the same with corporate philanthropy. It's something, okay, I do things that I'm not expected to do, and I do that without any, let's say, legal baseline. I'm not forced to do that, but I engage myself in philanthropy. Then we have an equivalent with CSR. That means it's more or less the same like corporate social responsibility. So these 2 terms, technical terms here in this case, are more or less the same. So don't be, let's say, misled by that. It's a little bit an artificial, let's say, try to distinguish here, but it may help you. Extended view of CC, it's the acknowledgement of the extended political role of a corporation in society. Okay, next please. Now, assessing corporate citizenship as a framework. We have the extended view of CC with some significant, or let's say it is significant, that help us frame business ethics in a new way. I mentioned that we are coming from a more ethical angle here. It's a political role of a corporation. They have one. It's about corporate accountability. I will discuss that in the next slides. And it also helps us to understand the business relation in different cultures, because as mentioned already, Asia, Latin America, Africa, our area here, we might address issues in a different manner. But this is something we have to keep in mind because we are working very, very close together. It's called globalization. So nothing is happening only in our domestic world. It has an impact. And sustainability, this is something I will discuss more thoroughly. And yeah, critical perspective on corporations' social role in more keeping with non-US ways of thinking about business ethics. Okay, the next, please. Corporate accountability. It's a third, let's say, term here that is used, and you should just have it heard, okay, what it is. I'll give you a short explanation also. Next, please. Yeah, what's corporate accountability? That corporate accountability refers to whether a corporation is answerable in some way for the consequences of its actions. So a corporation is doing something and it has to, let's say, give somebody else, give people, give a society, give citizens some account what exactly they do there. And this is called corporate accountability, showing your responsibility of your actions and be transparent, okay? Giving people the idea what exactly is behind your activities here. And the reason why we have corporate accountability getting more and more prominent here is because firms or corporations have begun to take in a role of political actors, taking up many of the functions previously undertaken by government, because government failure in some parts of the planet, environmental protection is not on a very, let's say, high level in the agenda. Or labor safety standards. Remember, you may have heard in the news that in Bangladesh, the textile laborers, many of them female, they have very, very, let's say, hard conditions regarding labor safety. This is something that the government may not be able or willing or whatever to, let's say, enforce. So the corporation has to do that. Increasing power and influence of corporations. I mentioned the big internet and Amazon, for example, already. The next, please. Yeah, the reasons for the political role of a firm. Government failure, we mentioned already. Government incapable, unwilling. Well, maybe because we don't have the money for some kind of activities, or it's not a priority, or whatever reason is behind that. So this is the reason why corporations start doing, let's say, or start acting on behalf or start acting as a substitute. And this is also the problem, rise of subpolitics. This is one of the risks behind that. If a company, whose main goal should be achieving some profit and gaining some profit on its activities, is doing politics now. You remember Friedman, the gentleman I cited in the beginning. This is nothing he sees as one of the main, let's say, objectives of a company. And one of the reasons why he was not very happy with this is exactly that. Then we have corporate power on the rise. Yes, quite a number of these corporations, they have a lot of influence. You see some examples here. why we should take a closer view on the political role of them. Also, governments increasingly encourage self-regulation, so by moving out of a regulatory business, you have some parts the government doesn't engage itself anymore. For example, remember telecommunication. When telecommunication was part of a government business, all the telecommunication are more or less privatized. So they are not in the hands of the government anymore. But it's a very important industry, right? It's communications, one of the most important industries I can think of currently. Yeah. Okay, next, please. So problem of the so-called democratic corporate accountability. Who controls corporations? The managers, we know that, but they are on the other side, yeah, responsible or accountable to the stakeholders and shareholders. To whom are corporations accountable? To the government. That's a spider web here, the web of corporate accountability, yes. Then the regulation by capital providers. It's the institutions or the private persons who are giving the money, or it's activist shareholders. Civil society regulation, consumer regulation, right? A corporation is responsible towards consumers as well. Employees, very important. As mentioned, France, very, very, let's say, prominent in regards of employee rights. Also self-regulation, human rights, due diligence. So key to corporate accountability is transparency. Transparency is the degree to which corporate decisions, policies, activities, and impacts are acknowledged and made visible to relevant stakeholders. So this is the most important thing here. Make your actions visible. Open the books, put your activities on the table so everybody can check out what you're doing and understand what you're doing. And the thing is, the more accountable you are, or the more transparent you are, the better it is, because everybody knows what you're doing and nobody is, let's say, feels uncomfortable. Like it's a matter of trust building. Trust building, very important. That's the reason we have corporate accountability. Okay, next, please. Now, sustainability. This is the second part, more or less, of the short lecture we have here. Please go on. Sustainability. Short definition on sustainability. Sustainable development is considered a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations. This is very important. So sustainable activities are that I start things doing today and they are positive for future generations. That does mean my generation doing things, it doesn't harm you. You doing things, it doesn't harm your children and your grandchildren. So thinking in a long-term perspective of more than one generation, future generations. And this is the definition of the World Commission on Environment and Development. And it's not that new, it's pretty old, 87. So we're in that business quite for a while, more than 30 years, yeah, almost 30 years. Sustainability, long-term maintenance of systems, and it's environmental, economic, and social. These are the three components. The next, please. So it's called the three components of sustainability, or the triple bottom line. Bottom line thinking suggests sustainability as a goal. Okay, we have it embedded in our strategy decisions. We have it embedded in our business planning. We do sustainable things from the start, and we do not try to integrate sustainability on the last few, let's say, inches of our planning period. We try to do that from the start, from scratch. And these three dimensions, they are mentioned again as a pyramid or triangular here. Environmental perspective, economic perspective, and social perspectives. Next, please. This is an example of corporations with a sustainability commitment or policy. I don't read it. I just, let's say, mentioned it and I highlighted the most important terms in red. You're more than happy to check the websites, and it's from different parts of the earth, like Volkswagen, it's Shell, it's Marks and Spencer's, and it's the Alibaba Group. And you see it's done all in 2019. Should be very, very actual, very recent. And just check it out if you learn something from these websites. Also, apply some critical thinking. Maybe these companies are missing something. Maybe it's not, let's say, precise enough. Maybe it's a little bit shallow, a bit superficial. Do yourself a favor, check it out and write a comment on that. Send it to them. Okay, next page, please. Sustainable consumption, a very important thing. Next, please. One of the most important things is starting, well, with us as individuals and also with us as managers, right? We just presume that we are managers in a corporation, and the things we should do is a sustainable consumption policy here. Yeah? Use of goods and services that respond to basic needs and bring a better quality to life, while minimizing the use of natural resources. Very important is here minimizing. Toxic materials, that does make sense, I think, and emissions of waste and pollutants over life cycle, so as not to jeopardize the needs of future generations. This is from the European Environment Agency. So that does mean we should use goods and services responsible, try to reduce or minimize the consumption of, for example, raw material, and think about a reduction of also toxic materials, try to eliminate, if possible, emissions of waste and pollutants. That makes sense because they're gonna harm us and also on environment, the nature. And also try to be, let's say, a little bit conservative in spending, let's say, too much on everything. Limit it. It's downsizing. Downsizing, right? Okay, next, please. So, steps towards a sustainable consumption. This wheel is quite a nice thing. It gives an overview again. We can start wherever we want. I mean, starting with waste management. Very important to separate the waste, reduce the waste, and eliminate any, let's say, toxic impact in regards of recycling waste. Sustainable resource management, that's what I mentioned already. Design for sustainability, very important thing. You have to start from scratch. In the first step of designing products and services, integrate sustainability thinking from the beginning and not trying to put it on when it's already too late or in the, let's say, final process of a design. Cleaner production, resource efficiency, make things more efficient. Try to use less. Sustainable transport, very good idea, okay? Try to avoid emission extensive transport means. Sustainable transport is something like if you are, let's say, you're used to fly short distances with an aircraft, but it's not necessary. You can use a train. So that's something we are trying to do here, right? We try to substitute our airfare for, let's say, domestic flights in Germany, because, yeah, I mean, 6 hours plus minus, this is something that you're thinking about. Do I need to have, do I need to take an aircraft or can I use a train? For example, eco-labeling and certification. This is very important. Give the people an idea what is exactly behind that product. Then sustainable procurement, very important. I cover that a little bit later. It's supply management. Supply management, it's something very, very, very important that has to be considered here. Sustainable marketing, also very, very important. I mean, marketing until recently was trying to persuade as many people as possible to buy as many stuff as possible. Is this the right way in the future? Try to persuade people to buy the right stuff, but not as many as possible. Why should you do that? Produce good stuff that lasts long and can be upgraded maybe. This is good marketing, sustainable marketing. Sustainable lifestyle. Sustainable lifestyle, for example, I mentioned it here, it's sharing. Sharing economy like Airbnb, for example, it's quite a good idea, by the way. You do not possess things, you share things, right? You're more a renter than a buyer. So instead of buying a car, you just buy mobility, the transportation from A to B. Does it necessarily have to be your own car? Maybe not. Okay. Or what's very nice is product recapture. Also the in electronics, I mentioned that later, and replacement for products. That's, I mentioned already, mobility rather than cars. Reducing demand, the last item here. This is something very important. If also companies trying to think about, do we really need that much of this specific item? Can we replace it by, for example, items that are biodegradable? Or do we need it at all? Can we leave it out of the production process because it doesn't help? Or does the customer really appreciate this feature? Leave a feature out and save cost on these left out feature because nobody uses it anyway. Think about the old video recorders, but I think you are too young to remember them. They had features nobody was using. Everybody was, let's say, completely, yeah. Well, it was over-engineering, right? That's quite a nice chart. Try to remember that. This gives you a very, very good idea about sustainable consumption. The next, please. So, product recapture. The standard process was a linear one, right? It was extraction, that means mining, getting the raw material out of the earth or the ocean. Manufacture in plants, distribute, drive it to the stores with lorries, consume, buy it, and then throw it away. That's the classic. Still very much prominent today. And that is something that is going to be replaced sooner, or let's say more and more. It's the circular flow of resources. You have still extraction here. You still manufacture, you distribute, consume, but you still dispose, but you start doing a product recapture. That means you take things apart and try to reuse that in the manufacturing process. That means you have to extract less than before because you're using material, right? This is a circular flow. And I will show you one example. Can you give me the next slide, please? Oh, no, it's okay. Sustainability, yes, continue. So I will come to one of the circular examples a little bit later. Well, ethical sourcing sustainability, that was something that was mentioned in one of the slides already. Ethical sourcing, that does mean that in our buying, as a buyer in the procurement department, for example, I have to consider more environmental criteria, also social and ethical criteria, but we are discussing currently sustainability, especially environmental criteria. This has to be manifested in the supply chain policies, procedures, and programs. So there is also a certification on that. It's an ISO certification that suppliers are, let's say, highly dependent on, their customers are more likely to comply. That means if you are in a situation where you as a supplier are very much dependent on your customers and your customers force you to comply, they will comply, right? And also manufacturers or suppliers that are relatively new entrants to the industry, they are also more willing to comply. And it's the last thing says that especially suppliers, the public act of gaining ethical certification can act as a way of reducing information asymmetries between themselves and potential buyers. So it's very important in the meantime that you demonstrate your sources and how you source. And the more ethical and the more sustainable this is, the better a chance you have to expand your business with certain very, very important suppliers. Okay. Next, please. Well, we discussed the extended chain of responsibility here. Mentioned already, it's a shift from global supply and competition that individual firms have to accept or no longer accept to argue that the ethics of a firm, suppliers of firms, impact its competitors are simply not any of its business. We have it in Germany here. It's called Lieferkettengesetz. This means that I, as a company, I am responsible for what my suppliers are doing here. I can't, let's say, excuse myself, but I buy from this company and whatever they do, I don't care. And this is a little bit let's say, it's a legal terminology a little bit. So, but the idea behind this, that unless recently the buying department did not care what exactly was behind that. All right, if let's say a supplier hit the bad press or hit the press because he did something wrong with his employees, everybody was concerned. But nobody was really, let's say, investigating into the supplying practices of his companies, what they did in Asia or in Latin America or Africa. And this is something that has changed. So I, as a buyer, a procurement department of a big corporation, I am responsible down the value chain. And this is pretty important. That's a pretty good law. Okay, next, please. So one of the things you definitely heard about is fair trade. This is a definition of fair trade. It's about giving, for example, disadvantaged producers in developing countries the opportunity to move out of poverty. That means they have the chance to participate in the global trade, get fair money for their services and fair products. They getting market access under beneficial rather than exploitative terms. It's also about empowerment of producers to develop their own business and participate in the international trade. Now, this slide here, also source mentioned below, gives you an idea of the fair trade revenues. And you see over the last, let's say, 5-6 years, it's increasing very, very steadily. It was a little bit interesting. It was interesting 2011, 2012. It was obviously a drawback here. But from 2015, it picks up and it's getting more and more. This is important information for everybody who wants to join, let's say, the industry and thinks about, let's say, promoting more for fair trade products and services. It's a very good business. I can absolutely, let's say, support that. Okay, next, please. Fair trade. What is the idea behind that? I'm just mentioning a few prominent things here. Fair trade practices should be clear. Fair payment, most important thing, that the money really goes to the provider, supplier, producer. No child labor, no forced labor, absolutely important. And also no discrimination, very important thing. Capacity building in the areas where these providers, suppliers, producers are work. And yeah, respect for the environment. Next, please. Yep. So the supply loops, it's something that I already mentioned there. We will go to an example. It's also about waste reduction and value recovery. The next, please. Circular economy. This is the definition of a circular economy. It's something you just read up, and it's two examples here. It's Nike doing the Nike grind with a material. The next, please. So this is an example of the electronic industry. I promised you that instead of throwing it away, you try to repair it. Second life durability. A very good example is, by the way, the iPhone. If you are not a, let's say, IT geek, or you are very trendy, you may buy your next iPhone refurbished. It's a used iPhone, but it's completely, let's say, reset. It's a refurbished iPhone, still working. You have a guarantee of 2 years. It's a nice thing, for example, in a circular environment. And if the iPhone breaks down and you don't need it anymore, so bring it to somebody, you can tear it apart and can use the individual parts for a new iPhone. Recycling. So this is something that is very important. It gets more and more important. Next, please. That's environmental management process through which organizations implement the goals, policies, and responsibilities to ensure regular auditing and reporting of these approaches beyond legal compliance. Again, something done beyond the law. You have to do it anyway, so there is a legal obligation to do that, but you are trying to step further, do more than the legal requirement. It's goals, policies, and responsibilities put down in some sort of report agenda. Okay, next, please. This is something for you to read up. I don't want to go through that. It's just the ISO and the EMAS, the international organization, and the European Commission. Some examples. Next, please. Yes. So, fields of action for the government: climate change, save the ocean, clean water, global supply of food, and a lot more. I mean, it's a very, very large portfolio where everybody can engage himself, herself, by the way. As a corporation, you can engage in all kinds of activities here. So this is open field. There's a lot of things to do. And the last slide gives you one example of, let's say, contradictory positions here, that climate control or global climate legislation and business response is interesting how it works, that the reductions in carbon dioxide reductions present a big threat for some industries, and they were really trying to, let's say, dilute the legal activities here, try to get less stiff and less tough laws on that. And this is an example how it worked. It's 2005, so it's a little bit older here, but anyway. Other issues are global supply for food, water. The Bolivian example, ethical issues in water privatization, was pretty prominent. So Bolivia, the until then public water supply was sold to private company, and it's a lot of impact. And also the volatility of global markets for wheat, rice, especially regarding the manufacturing of biofuels. So rice, wheat, they use for fuel. And this is something that on the other side causes some trouble in regards of the supply of food. I think that was the last one. Yes, so I try to stick to 45 minutes, apologize for 5 minutes. But anyway, anything you want to ask, anything you're interested in, you will get the presentation, so no worries.
Yeah, I will share presentation afterwards. Thank you very much for your precious, really it was very precious, and it was very beneficial. What I'm interested in, I have one question, if you don't mind. It's about corporate social responsibility is bolted on. So what do you mean? I mean that bolt on means to adding some parts of machines or something. So what's this one? I didn't understand how.
Yeah. So the global social responsibility, when firstly introduced to corporations, they did not really appreciate that as a value for itself. And so the impression you have, or you had, because it's some time ago, right, is that it was not really integrated, or let's say it was not immersed. It was bolted on, means, as you mentioned correctly, it's just, you just nail it basically, or you bolt it on somebody that's existing, and it's not really orchestrated, right? So the corporate social responsibility was something that it was not integrated in the strategy, in the planning process, in the auditing process, in the accountability process. So somebody mentioned, or let's say, put it that way, just an example, right? You have a corporation and somebody says, look, we have to do something here. Everybody is a little bit bored and says, well, I don't see that, we don't like that. And then just to start things, they established a small unit, a small team, a small, let's say, a small team of people. And they told them, look, you take care of corporate social responsibility, but nobody else did. So these poor people, they tried to integrate social responsibility into anything, but it was not part of the system. It was not really integrated. And that means it is bolted on. It is
okay.
Afterwards, it was, let's say, added, but not with a lot of love, appreciation, or anything. And the second thing is it was integrated. It was basically embedded. And this was the difference over the last 20 years.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? Any questions, please feel free to ask the question. Even if you don't wanna, I hope that after uploading the video onto YouTube, you will write the comments, and I hope that our professor will see, and hope that eventually he will reply the questions and the comments.
One of the questions I received from my students is it worth, let's say, engaging in that? I say yes. Because as you saw, the profit increase, or let's say the turnover in fair trade products, or in, let's say, a sustainable goods and services is increasing. A lot of people are taking care of it. A lot of people are really concerned about environment issues. And the buying decision from companies and also from private sector, from people, from consumers like us, they will, let's say, very, very much go in that direction in preferring sustainable products and services than before. So it's a good idea to engage. It's a good idea to join a business that is, let's say, really trying to do corporate social responsibility actively and honestly. So it's something you should familiarize yourself a little bit when taking the employment decision. And it's something that's pretty good. And it's something that is getting more and more attention, and it's increasing in, let's say, importance.
Any question, guys? If no question, no question. I think that always, if you don't have.
Thank you, Professor, for today's conference and for all the information you gave us. Thank you.
More than welcome. It was a pleasure being with you, and pleasure for me to have this opportunity to discuss this and also bring the idea to you. As mentioned before, the idea was a social overview, give you some ideas what's behind that. And it's a lot of stuff, so you may investigate on your own, but it was a first introduction.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor.
You're welcome.
If any questions, after any questions, we have a chat and everybody will receive your questions in our chat, in Teams chat. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, guys, thank you very much, guys.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.